United States is going to be the spiritual leader of the world. And in order to fulfill our destiny, we have to make those changes on the individual level. And it's going to mean a lot of work for each individual. A lot of spiritual work, a lot of physical work, intellectual work, to be a better people. I think each of us know what we need to do to transform. The Baha'i faith and the Institute process, which is this educational system, helps to create the capacities in individuals to be able to let go of those fears, to let go of those anxieties, and to trust that we can make a better world, but it starts with the self. I'm Frances Mastry. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am raising a daughter and managing a household and a garden, and I have another son on the way. Right now I'm learning about regenerative agriculture, applying my love for nature and gardening and trying to integrate working with children and elderly out in the garden, and encouraging other people, especially in the neighborhood setting, to support one another and to connect through gardening. And I also love to play capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial arts. So I was born in 1987 in Pleasanton, California, of San Francisco area. My parents immigrated here in the 1970s from the Philippines. So they were praying to Jesus. They're from Catholic backgrounds for 9 years before they had me. And they had me, my brother and sister. I had a wonderful childhood. My mother, she's a registered nurse. At the time when we were growing up, she was just so happy to have children that she took off work, and for about 6 or more years she stayed at home with us while my dad worked as an engineer. Pleasanton, California at the time was a very white and soon to be upper class area. I grew up really thinking that I was part of this white culture. So my parents would speak to us in Tagalog at the home, but we would respond to them in English. My family loved to take vacations and spend money and go to Reno, the casinos, and Lake Tahoe. And my mom loved to gamble. And while she was gambling, we would go snowboarding, we would enjoy the snow and the outdoors. But I do remember having a feeling of, why are we spending all this money? And it was a lot of based on materialism. My brother and I, we were like best friends growing up. We played all sorts of games together, and we connected in bullying my little sister. I thank God to this day that we didn't create a monster because of how much we bullied her. She was very strong and steadfast. My sister and I, we didn't get along until each of us were in college. We left for college, and when we had our space, that's when we were able to really love one another. So high school, I was the co-editor of the yearbook, and I loved graphic design, and I wanted to get into communications, and I loved commercials and creativity. So I got into UC San Diego. After a year or two, I was moving away from communications and more towards wanting to help change the world. and I found myself in the environmental activist movement. I got very extreme in environmentalism and activism. You would say it was very frenetic. At that time, all of the guilt that came from Catholicism, I applied to environmentalism. It's very strong in the Filipino culture as well as the Catholic culture to make one feel guilty for sinning, for anything one does that is against the laws of the faith. And I think the lack of connection between my friends and our parents, because of the language and cultural barrier, really magnified these feelings of our parents really wanting us to be obedient and follow the culture and follow the Catholic traditions, but we didn't respect our parents in that way. And because we have these external forces telling us, you know, we need to go out and party and we need to live this material, luxurious life, and to do so we need to study, and so spending time with family and doing chores around the house or going to church was not part of that vision that we were being fed to. And so, of course, there would be a lot of nagging from our parents and a lot of fear and worry. And I think that they used guilt to try to control us or try to encourage us to be the best people we could be in the way that they knew how. But for us, really became this form of guilt that disillusioned us from the faith, from the Catholic tradition, from Christianity, from Jesus. So my friends and I would go with our parents to church on Sundays. We would sit together on the last pew in the church, and during the first song, when everyone would stand up and everyone would sing, we would leave and go and get ice cream and come back when it was the closing prayer, and our parents would not even realize that we had left. In college, it was a lot of culture of partying and numbing pain and trying to forget about your problems by, you know, having fun. And so I was very immersed in that culture, and it helped me to numb the pain, to rely on substances and to rely on this kind of extreme self-righteousness in the environmental field. So it was at that point that I decided I was agnostic. I either didn't believe in God or couldn't prove that God existed, or I was atheist. I didn't even believe in God at all. I knew that my family was worried that I wasn't going to church on Sundays, and they wanted me to be engaged in something spiritual. And I knew in my heart that I needed that. So I started to search, not very actively, but perhaps in my own way, praying to God. My college had a commuter lounge that many people came to. Maybe 20 or 30 people would come every day and just hang out in between classes. Lo and behold, I meet a Baha'i who was around my age, and he invited the whole commuter lounge to participate in devotionals and eventually a book one. There was a lot of Persian food, a lot of vegan food because he and his family were vegan. And I remember connecting with him on veganism because I was very much into that at the time. I had watched this documentary called Zeitgeist, and it was all about how all of the messengers from God were from the same source, but it was a conspiracy theory. We should be very cautious of these messengers from God. And so I said, well, they're all from the same source and they're all saying the same message, so we shouldn't listen to them. So when I met my friend and went to the devotionals, and I went to a holy day and a Yamiha party on campus. And so finally I asked my friend one day, what is this Baha'i faith? And he said, it is about one God, one human family, one religion. I said, wow, I had this idea that all of the religions were one, but it was a very negative view. So this is a positive viewpoint on that very idea. So from that moment on, it took me a year to investigate the faith. I read every book I could. My friend gave me a lot of books that I dived deep into. All of the concepts resonated with me, especially oneness of all people, oneness of God. But I was very stubborn in keeping with old habits. So I declared in 2010, and I was very afraid to share with my Catholic parents. I was lucky to have a friend who was very honest and frank with me, and we had such a deep relationship that he was able to say, Fran, you believe in this, and you believe in Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah says we shouldn't drink or smoke, and he says we shouldn't have premarital relations, and he says that we need to do this, but you're still doing these things. You can't just take pieces that you agree with and throw away the rest. You need to be able to accept all of it. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, I hadn't told my family that I had become a Baha'i. And I was living in Maryland. I got my first job at the University of Maryland, and I ended up doing graduate school there. And I was still living the life of someone who is not a Baha'i. But I was so extreme in my self-righteousness and thinking still that physically I manifested the spiritual veils that I had. And so physically I was, in the type of job I was doing, I was almost crippled because I was working on the computer doing graphic design, and I would not stop. I wouldn't take breaks. And I had severe back, shoulder, neck problems at a point where I couldn't even drive a car because it was so much pain. I had chronic pain for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I was in a deep depression. I went back into my old ways like I did in college of, finding a boyfriend, and I found a boyfriend who helped me get through it, but in a very material way and in a very unhealthy relationship. And I went back to using substances to help me numb the pain, the physical and the spiritual pain. So it was around this time that I started to slowly find the Baha'is in the area in Maryland, in College Park. So very slowly I started to get involved. It wasn't until I started teaching children's classes and animating junior youth groups that I was able to fully realize that I need to give up these habits. And if I'm going to be teaching this to children, I need to move away from this old lifestyle. By doing that, I was able to move away from unhealthy relationships I was in and towards service, and away from an unhealthy career and towards serving full time. When I was in a very unhealthy relationship, I had been praying to find a Baha'i who plays capoeira for about a year. After 6 months, I didn't meet any Baha'i who plays capoeira, nothing close, so I said, okay, maybe I need to lower my standards and find just anyone who is spiritual or even just believes in God, and anyone who really enjoys movement. I met Mike at a junior youth coordinator seminar. He picked me up at the bus stop, and in his car, on the way to the seminar, within the first 40 minutes, I found out he was a Baha'i who played capoeira. And so I was shaking. I couldn't believe that God had answered my prayers, that I started feeling like maybe this is too good to be true. Maybe he's taken. So the next morning, I was outside of the seminar, and I was in the backyard of the house we were staying in, and I just started practicing capoeira, and I wanted to get out and just play a little bit, and he joined me. The next day, he told me that he had looked at my Facebook and he knew already. And so because he was so honest about looking at my Facebook before, I said, wow, this is amazing that you were honest about it. I love that quality. And that's when I told him I had been praying to find a Baha'i who plays capoeira for a year. Maybe 2 days after we had met, he shared that he prayed about it the night before, and that he's not asking to marry me, but he wanted to explore and get to know one another's character in that direction. And I said, me too! This was the point where I needed to tell my parents that I had become a Baha'i, because we needed to get consent. And so I shared with them that the law of consent, we started out with that, but in that process, of course, we had to talk about the Baha'i faith. In the Catholic tradition, if you go outside of Christianity, it really is a sin. And the parents, of course, would not be able to support this marriage because they themselves would be committing a sin. It took us a year to win their hearts. And it took us, both Mike and I had to move to California and be close to them to develop a relationship and to nurture this understanding that we weren't trying to disrespect them, but that we wanted to build upon that, and through the Baha'i faith really spread the love for Jesus and spread the love for all the manifestations of God. Right after we found out we got consent, this was close to a year after Mike and I had met. About 2 weeks later, we got married. My parents would not come to the wedding, so we decided to keep it very small and humble. We called up some friends, asked if they could be our witness and be there. So it was a total of 9 people at our wedding, including us, at the house of worship outside in the gardens. and we made our way down to North Carolina. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. If your heart is searching, the answer will come to you like a breeze.